Hey, I would like to introduce you to Heartbeat Productions. Our group consists of 3 members who offer a lifetime experience of short films. Our aspiration to visually overwhelm our audience by the skills of our post-production process and our successful films.
1. In what ways do your media products use, develop, or challenge forms and conventions of real media? Our first main convention we used was camera shots. We used many shots from all angles and most of them were conventional from our inspirations. We used very basic and simple camera shots that were more serious compared to our AES opening sequence last year. This was because we were filming something more mature and more for a higher age target audience, so we felt it would be more appropriate. Another main important convention we used was locations. One of the most vital part of our film was to choose the correct location to film in. We brainstormed several ideas of iconic places where we could record our scenes. After several arguments, as a group, we decided that the London Eye and Central London was most suitable for our film, as it was easy to reach and it was one of the main tourist attractions in London. It was also located on the South Bank, which meant we were able to film in the River Thames and London Bridge, as they are all in the same perimeter as the London Eye. Our last 2 scenes consisted of a train station and the graveyard. So we again had to brainstorm several places where we could film. Our train station scene we chose was Paddington Station, as it had higher ground level where we were able to film our actress who was below us. Lastly, we decided what graveyard we wanted to record in our scene. Within a few minutes we found a close graveyard near Harrow Road, and we had to choose the train station which was near it. At first we decided to use Victoria Station, but then we realised there was no appropriate area to film in. The locations we filmed in were places our protagonists had to visit while having our flashbacks. These places are not only iconic but mean something to her, and she previously visited them, so they were more iconic to her as well. Every time she visits a place with so much memory, her emotions trigger flashbacks of when she was happier. However, the graveyard is a different place. It's where the protagonist will reveal her dark secret and her oxymoron feelings. So location plays a big part in our conventions we used, as it sets the story and speaks out for our dialogue. One other convention we didn't really consider much was lighting. This isn't really important because we feel that the lighting was mainly filmed outside, so the sun was really what our source of light. We did tackle a few problems, such as too much light in the graveyard. We fixed it through Final Cut Pro, as we had an option to reduce lighting.
Another convention we used was costumes. Costume was a great aspect of keeping the audience engrossed into our film. When choosing our costumes, we had to look at the trait the characters playing in order to portray their personality. So the costumes we decided to use also had to relate back to the title Guilty Grieving, as our main protagonist was blacked out throughout most of the film. This emphasized her grieving. Black is a colour that connotes not only death and mourning, but it also helped symbolise the evil side to our character. The costume idea for the male protagonist was chosen to be very casual. We decided to dress the male protagonist in a shirt and a tie. This represented a hard-working office man, but his simple basic look also suited his trait in being a laid-back character. The costumes we used also helped establish a time period, and it also created a sense of verisimilitude, with the characters being current young people who took care of their parents and fitted into society. The film that we were mostly inspired by was The Hand That Rocks the Cradle. We were inspired by the costumes widely, as it shares the same genre as our short film, romantic thriller, and it also includes a twist. The female protagonist in The Hand That Rocks the Cradle is portrayed as an ordinary woman living in normality. Her costume is the main thing that allows the audience to suggest that, so we decided to use the same convention as it worked well with our film. Another convention that we also looked at was through narrative. Our narrative had to follow the convention rules of a short film. We chose to create a challenging romantic thriller short film, so we decided to include a twist to our storyline, merging both genres together. Our research of secondary resources allowed us to develop our initial idea from being boring and simple to a challenging exclusive narrative. Our first narrative idea that we did was based around a girl who comes from abroad, exploring a new country, ends up meeting a typical British man who, shows her around. As every other romantic story, they end up falling in love. We wanted to create something different, something to give more to the audience. So we worked around that. And our final narrative production was made to create a short film in a short period of time, but with a bigger story made up from history. We were able to create this by adding flashbacks to our film. The use of flashback reveals to the audience past history and builds up the storyline. The music video Break Even was a great inspiration, as we took the idea of using flashbacks from there. When we were planning our narrative, we decided to use no dialogue and only soundtracks throughout it. We thought the film would have a better effect on the audience if we played music that suited our scene. We were able to tell the story with no verbal communications with the audience, by breaking the barriers of a conventional romantic thriller. Characters was also a main convention that we used after we decided on our short film storyline. We started to look at the characters that we needed to star in it. We needed to choose a suitable character that would be able to render different personalities and keep a good performance throughout the whole film. We had to create our character to suit our narrative, so the story made sense. The first step we did was research into other films with the same genre. The Hand That Rocks the Cradle was also one of the inspirations that we took from characters. We looked at it into depth of how the characters were portrayed and how it builded up. We were mainly inspired by the female protagonist. We thought her character built up steadily throughout the film until the twist was revealed at the end. Her character as an independent young woman suited the role she played, so we decided to use the same convention in our film. Our character needed to have a passion for acting. She had to portray a range different of emotions and feelings. This was a main characteristic, as the twist of our film revealed through facial expressions and body expressions, as we had no verbal dialogue. I felt that I would be able to play the role of this character well, as I've studied the subject drama. I also felt that my characteristics suited the description needed perfectly as an independent young woman. My team members strongly agreed with me. I was able to convey the character well, as I understood the emotions involved well, and I knew what was expected of this character, seeing as I did create her. So that worked well through our film. Another aspect that we looked at when decided on creating a character was the target audience. We wanted to keep our characters leveled with our target audience so they were able to have a better understanding of the character. We also wanted them to relate themselves to our film, so they're able to look at our film in a wider depth instead of just watching a romantic thriller short film.
Okay, so we used many different props, or several key different props perhaps actually, in our film, and there were some that were more significant than others. And one of the key ones was using a knife, having our main actress, the main character of ours, drop a knife onto the ground as if dropping into the grave of her boyfriend, her partner. And using props like a knife, obviously there's health and safety issues, and we couldn't walk around London with a knife because we might get arrested. So we used the school, some of the ground on the school, even though it looks as if it's part of the graveyard scene, it's actually in the school. But it's the prop of the knife is really significant, as it's one of the most effective props within the film, and it emphasises the evil, sinister acts of the lovers, and it really kind of helps signify the fact that she's not so innocent and just grieving, that she's also actually the one who caused this to happen. Another key prop was the flowers. We'll talk about the way that the flowers and the knives work together in a second. But with the knife, the kind of use of the knife as a iconic statement in horror films came from influence from the film Psycho, and obviously there's a tremendously famous shower scene in Psycho, where the knife, is kind of hacking and slashing down, and we wanted our knife to have that same kind of impact, dropping down into the grave, quite a final, telling image at the end of our film. So that was the kind of convention of the prop that we wanted to use and how we did use it. So the rose was like a contrast to that, and what we had the prop of the rose, quite a conventional one. You see it happening a lot in films to signify this kind of sense of loss and grief. And we had our actress drop the rose onto the grave and then juxtapose that in the editing stage with the knife, so that the slow-mo of the rose would fall down onto the grave, and then that would cut, and it would be a knife that we actually see going into the ground. And that was a key signifier for our audience, so that they knew that she was the killer. It was a crucial scene. It's only a short scene really, but it's a crucial scene. So those props working together, in contrast, were really effective for our film. Another prop that we used was just a handbag for the actress, our main character, and one that just created that sense of things being normal, that sense of verisimilitude, and it was important that she gave that idea that she was just somebody, who was kind of going around London, revisiting scenes from her past. As well as this, then, we use things such as a mobile phone and a wine glass. And again, these seemed quite unintentional props, but actually they both played a significant part, because the wine glass was used to not only show the kind of casual meeting between the two lovers and that were there, in a cafe, but to show them as quite fairly mature, fairly sophisticated people in their past as well. So I thought the wine glass helped to signify that. And the mobile phone was obviously used to kind of tell the story of them taking photos of themselves, whether they were on the London Eye or whether they were down by the bridge, and it was about documenting their time together. So that was the kind of key signifier for that prop for us as well. So they were the key things. Obviously the knife and the flower are the big key props, and the props that probably carry the most significance and the most meaning, but the others also helped everything tie together. In terms of layout, composition and effects, our poster took inspiration from other posters, such as Remember Me and Mr. and Mrs. Smith, because particularly with the Remember Me one, there was a famous landmark used, and in Mr. and Mrs. Smith there was a key relationship between the two characters shown, and that was something, both those things were things that we wanted to include in ours, and we wanted to kind of emphasise the fantasy relationship between our two characters by using the famous landmark of the London Eye and Houses of Parliament, but we also wanted to use it so the audiences are kept puzzled in what happens in the film, making them believe their film is a happy ending, but perhaps also one that doesn't turn out so good with what else we've seen in there as well. So in terms of our film poster, we tried to make it as conventional as possible, more or less, really, and we tried to follow some of the key conventions of film posters. So we had our title as the largest and most dominant aspect of the poster. We had the stars of our poster at the top as a kind of skyline, and we had the tagline somewhere connected but significantly smaller than the actual title. We also had the date down in the kind of lower third, and the billing block at the bottom, which outlined all the production names, along with things like the website address of our blog, the production company logo that we've got in black and white, and the logo of our school, also in black and white. What we wanted to do in terms of layout and composition is we wanted to have our characters as the central focus, because they are the central focus of our narrative. So having them right in the middle was important. Having them really central was really important, and we used the background location of the London Eye, obviously in keeping with the rest of our film. Now, if we look at the poster of Dreamhouse, the one we took inspiration from, there's some similarities and obviously some differences as well. Now, their title dominates the poster and is fairly central. They have the second tagline even that's separated and slightly smaller than their title, and then at the top as a type of skyline again they've got their stars that are in there, and they've got one of the stars, Daniel Craig, facing forward. Now obviously they've got a more stylized photo of their star incorporated and blended into the background, and obviously perhaps our skills with Photoshop etc. aren't advanced as those as professional, but we have tried quite clearly to follow those main particularly layout composition features of a film poster. In terms of challenging conventions slightly, I suppose we wanted to create a stronger brand identity perhaps, and continue using the Gushing Meadows font for the first letters of the titles, and then follow that through on the first numbers on the date as well. And so that was something that we wanted to do. We also wanted to show the difference between the characters in terms of their names. So Abdou-Nour and Duha El-Sous, their names are in different colours to show the kind of disconnection between the two characters on there as well. So that was it really with regards to our poster.
Soundtrack is another important convention used in our film. Because we don't have any dialogue in our film, soundtrack is a really important aspect, as it delivers the dialogue itself without anyone actually talking. One of our inspirations for the music were used in Twilight. It was depressing, romantic and mysterious. The main instruments used are pianos and violins, which symbolize tradition, class and quality. It could also suggest romance. We will try to create something. We tried to create something similar to it for when the protagonist was walking around central London and in the grave. Soft yet dynamic sounds were used in our soundtrack at the start of the film. This created a sense of emotion and intensity atmosphere. The music used also signifies to the audience the emotional state the protagonist is in. The sting sound effect used changes the scene to a flashback scene. We used this to keep our film flowing and not confuse the audience. The change of the music used when the protagonist enters the graveyard scene creates a more urged tension. It changes the atmosphere from being warm, soft, and hard upbeat tense mood. The change in the music is the first thing that reveals our twist to the audience, leaving them puzzled.
Our magazine review also was a fairly conventional product, but one that we wanted to make sure that we not only kept the conventions but kept it in keeping with the rest of our products and the rest of our idea. So we had the layout from Empire, the one on Warrior here, where we've got a dominant main image, we've got the title in the top left, we've got the kind of the top skyline information of where we are in the magazine. You've got an info bar and an info box at the beginning, and you've got the review written out in columns with a rating and a star rating at the bottom right hand corner. Now for our magazine review we had a very similar layout, but we wanted to incorporate more than one image, so we had an image overlapping with a border on there as well, so just kind of playing with that as a convention perhaps. And we wanted to vary up things like the colour scheme and the fonts, so it would be more in keeping with our actual product. The info bar was something that we thought was still useful even though it's a short film, so we kept that in there. But we wanted to make sure that it had an overall sinister feel and tone in terms of the colour schemes of red and black. We also played with the idea of the knives as rating. So in the stars we had the knives as a rating. Again, something that signifies and is a key thing about our film. Perhaps most importantly though, the language, the way that the review is written. We spent a long time working on the review and making sure that the tone was entertaining, as well as being informative and opinionated, but also making sure that it had quite a strong drive and sense of professionalism with how it was written. So we tried very hard to make the review as clear and as accurate as possible, but as engaging as possible. That's kind of the crucial thing. Rather than just having the layout say things for us, the words were also important with what we did. We also used captions. Now, captions conventionally are little funny bits of writing on the images, and we did that with ours, with a joke about getting signal in London, and quite a sinister joke about necrophilia in the bottom. That again was something that we wanted to kind of just play around with and include. We also had a separated text box that was highlighted and emphasised, that's taken very clearly from influence from what Empire have used and how they've used these separate quote boxes, just to kind of pull the reader in to what we've got here from this as a magazine. But I think it works very well within the conventions, as well as playing and altering little bits of that. We also included little bits just to give it that professional feel. So for instance, the page numbers, the date of release, things like the web address, and also a Twitter account, and we talked about downloading an app with regards to the magazine, something that you see quite often in different magazines now, the way that they exist on not just as a magazine but also outside of this too. So in terms of combination of our main task and our two print ancillary tasks, I think that they all relate very strongly. We focused on the colour scheme, the fonts, the images, and the overall kind of genre and feel of the genre in all three tasks, and made sure that they were consistent and that they were coherent. The common elements that we thought about and looked at linking between these three products included things like stylistic features, which stand out to our audience and remember, for our brand, our overall brand identity, being diverse and gloomy, but at the same time having that quite dramatic twist. In order to keep our brand identity across the 3 products, we made sure that we used a particular font, and we had an idea that the font should be the same for the title on all 3 products. And the font that we used to emphasise the kind of ghastly, bloody nature of our film was a font called Gushing Meadows, which is a font that had the blood dripping down from it, and we used that only on the first letters of our title, and it appeared on our title card, it appeared on our poster, and it appeared on our magazine review. As well as this, to keep that connection going and that sense of brand identity, we also used it on the first letter of the credit sequence for each of our actors and our production roles that came up afterwards. As well as this, then we chose a font afterwards called FT Fan Song, which is actually a Chinese font but had a nice, clean, classic look, and we used that to for the remaining letters of our title. And again, it was that contrast between the two, something quite horrific, almost comic book in the horror level, and then something quite classic, quite elegant in the font that followed it. And we wanted the fonts to be quite vivid, and so chose the colour scheme of white and red or black and red, again for the contrast, and again for to keep the common elements of the sinister and stylish edge that we've got. But that was something that was a crucial thing of linking our 3 products. As well as this, then we wanted to think about the overall colour scheme. So the overall colour scheme from our magazine review and our poster and our film, and we wanted to use colours such as black and red and white to help signify the kind of overall elements of grieving and grief, but also of blood, also of passion, that we help to signify all these different elements, and keep these running through the 3 texts. So we've got, the red title and the red on the date of the poster, and we've got the red throughout the magazine review, even using that, like we said, with that font on the big drop cap for the magazine review, and at the end the summary, the rating summary, as well as having the font and the colour scheme using the same and linking that together. We also had a little playful thing with the ratings, whereas usually it would be stars for ratings, while we in Photoshop took images of a knife and used that, and there's 4 knives, kind of slashing knives, and again that's something, a theme that fits with the rest of our film. The knife is a key prop that we see in our film. It's also the kind of murder weapon, the signifier for us, and what we talked about there. As well as that, we've tried to use the knife and the rose, those contrasting things, in our evaluation, and you'll see that as the background of what we've done there. As well as this, then, we thought about the overall feeling, the way that all 3 products contained not only a sense of foreboding and something that was about to kind of something sinister that was about to happen, and that with the black background of the magazine review, and of the images that we chose to use from the graveyard, and the black and white scene like a memory with Big Ben in the background, that was something that we wanted to kind of keep in, was that overall feeling of something not quite right. And if we look at the actual main poster, that's something that we tried to incorporate there as well. And again, we've got that idea that of our actress looking around with a sinister smile on her face, something that we see in the film at the very final shot, and that keeps that clear link, that coherence between those different products. As well as that, of course, we've got the use of iconic London locations. That is a key part of our film to show the romance, the elements of romance. So using the London Eye, actually going on the London Eye and shooting around there, using the Big Ben and the Houses of Parliament, those as kind of key signifiers of place and the elements of romance. Well, in the actual magazine, we use that too. We see that shot of the two lovers taking a photo of themselves in front of the Houses of Parliament, and then in the poster, we see both the Houses of Parliament and the London Eye faded out in the background. So that again was something that they kind of linked together, as well as that use of black and white. I said already that the black and white was the faded memory. We tried to incorporate that both, in the flashbacks of the film. We also saw a black and white and a colour image in the magazine review, and at the same time we had the male character, the nameless male character, faded in black and white on the poster to show that he is just a distant memory. And that was something that we wanted to incorporate quite clearly as a coherent thing across all three texts.
Our first step into research and planning was to gain audience feedback on what the audience thought makes a good romantic thriller. We wanted to create our film based on both our ideas and the audience's, in order for our short film to satisfy the producers and the viewers. For question 1, the most responses we got back was adding a twist to the storyline. They stated that by adding a twist creates more suspense to the film, keeping the viewers focused until the end. From asking the audience, we also learned that the audience are looking for a unique romantic thriller-based film that has not yet been made. We took all the feedback into consideration and worked around it, making sure we gave the audience what they wanted in a romantic thriller. We chose to add a twist to our film. We also decided to create an interview as part of our audience research. The last part of audience research we decided to do was create a questionnaire. We asked basic but useful limited questions. One of the questions we asked was, if there was a psycho female protagonist in the film, what trait would you like her to have? This question helped us decide on creating our character. As shown below, most people chose crazy and innocent. As both traits had a fairly similar amount of votes, we decided to combine both together and please the audience. We learned that both traits did work well together to form our character. This also worked well with our twist, as the two personalities were portrayed to the audience in one character, revealing our twist of her being a psycho. Halfway through filming, we edited a rough cut of our film and asked the audience for feedback on what they thought we were doing well at and what we could improve on. We were quite surprised with the feedback we got from our audience, as most of it was positive. We had some improvements that needed doing, sharpening our soundtrack so the film and music play on time, add more close-ups of the female protagonist in order to show her emotions more. After taking the feedback into consideration, we learned that we needed to expose more emotions in our main character, so we decided to include a close-up of our female protagonist crying. We showed her tears through emotion, portraying the emotion sadness. The feedback we got on our finalized poster and our finalized film review was quite good. Most of the audience liked the color schemes that we used. They thought that the film review was very it was really good to read. Also our finalized poster stood out. It suited our film, and the audience said that all our overall production film, our finalised poster and our finalised film all suited and had the same theme throughout it, which kept the process production all together, which was really good. We were pleased with the feedback that we gained, and overall we thought that we did a good job in pleasing the audience. As for our finished production, our overall production, we were pleased as Heartbeat Productions with what we achieved. Our audience were also pleased with our romantic thriller short film. They highly enjoyed it and they thought we created a successful film. We published our production and we published our final production on YouTube, and unexpectedly we made 88 views in the first hour of uploading our film. This was quite surprising and a shock for us as we wasn't expecting as much views. We received good comments, which we were highly pleased with. We also decided to create an interview after our production to gain feedback on what our target audience thought of our overall film. We learned that it's highly important that our poster and our film review and our final production all goes together, as they are all joined and they are all connected, and they really all tell basically the story. So in order for us to please the audiences and the viewers, we need to make our film appealing for them to want to watch, and we need to have them standing out so they're eye-catching. But overall, I think that we succeeded in what we aim to do, and we're very pleased with our final production, and I hope you enjoy watching. Here is an interview we created after our final production.
What did you think of the finished film?
I think it is fantastic, the way they acted, the actors just, and the music very tensing, makes you want to watch more of it, want to see what's going to happen. I think it's really great, it's something I would watch.
What stood out for you?
Well, for the film, I think most of the music, very tensing, it builds up the tension, and it makes you want to see, is someone going to die, is she going to do something, bad? So I think it's really good.
What did you think of the twist?
I think it's actually it's really good, the way they've done it with the, memories, the black and white. It really put, the audience, making them think now and then, how it happened, and what happened, so we understand the storyline. But I think it's really good.
How do you think that the film links in with the poster and the magazine?
I think it links, because I didn't know when I saw the poster and the magazine first. I was like, okay, what is this, but it actually goes with it, because it all starts off at the big wheel, Millennium Wheel, and it's just that's where it started. The main plot of the film is based there, and the black background of the magazine, it shows death and more of the dark side of the character. So I think it's really good.
You're going to need little bits of cook like that. Yeah, you'll need 2 or 3 of that, and then you need Ali speaking. Then.
Yeah, I think the film is very good actually. It's got a lot of good effects, camera shots in there. It's filmed in different locations, so he did put a lot of effort in actually. And yeah, hopefully you win.
Yeah, that's fine. Mashallah, yeah, it was a very good film. I think the iconic locations were very effective, and the music suited it very well. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. The twist was quite exciting, and I think you've come a long way since your last film, so well done.
We learned that the audience enjoyed watching our film as we gained all positive feedback back from the audience. The audience mostly enjoyed the effects we used and the chosen iconic locations we decided to film at. The music was also a great success in our film. Most of all, the audience enjoyed the added twist to our film, as it made the film more interesting to watch and kept the viewers' eyes hypnotized to the screen. We also learned that our poster magazine suited well with our final production, as it all had the same theme throughout. This was a great use of convention, as all three products are coherent.
This proved to be very useful asset as we used it to film all of our footage. Not only did we use the camera to film our film, but we used it for our questionnaire interview to film our target audience answering questions. The camera helped us to use a range of shots with the assistance of a tripod. We managed to film close-ups, mid-shots, long shots, and many other shots that we used in our film. Microphone. We used this as it was attached to our camera, and it helped reduce unnecessary noise such as wind. The useful thing about it was that it was already attached to the camera and we didn't have to carry it everywhere separately. Canon 550D. We use this camera to take photos when filming, and also for the poster. This isn't really an important hardware we used because we didn't really use it much. MacBook Pro. This was a very useful technology, especially in the construction stage, as not only was it portable, but it allowed us to use up-to-date software such as Final Cut, which helped us edit our film, Motion Pro, which helped us create our opening title and credits, Soundtrack Pro, where we created all our music for our film. This software proved to be very useful as our film was a silent film and we had to depend on the music and sounds to speak to the audience. Computers. These allowed us to access all our blogs and keep up to date with our work, as well as write posts. Final Cut Pro. This is the most used software for our project, as we used it for our film, interview, and evaluation. Most of us already had the basic knowledge from previous experiences to use it. However, I had the most experience, so we decided as a team that I should be the editor and work more within this section. Many useful features in Final Cut Pro, and some of them helped us overcome many difficulties and situations, such as when we visited the graveyard. We visited it more than once, and the weather wasn't the same, so the lighting would be more different, as you can see here. So one of the things we did was desaturate it. So as you can see here, the color correction, as you can see here on the screen, is more brighter and lighter, and with the effect it made it more dark and made it match all the other scenes. A useful feature on Final Cut is the use of transitions. I use this to create the flashbacks. So for example, what I do is put a scene of her walking depressed around London, and then I'll add the scene of her flashbacks. And to get the effect I want, which is black and white, I'd have to add a filter, and tint normally does what I need it to do, so it makes it black and white. So it gives the effect of black and white, which represents old times and like to show that it's the past and not the present. The transition I normally add is a simple one. I just press Command and T and I'll get a simple transition. So that's what it's like. And as you can see, the transition leads into the same place but a memory, and it's in black and white. I also added a sting sound to the flashbacks. So it'll be like, let me show you. That, which replaces dialogue and adds the effect of tension and makes the audience more nervous. Another thing is the control of speed. When our protagonist was dropping the flower, I made sure it was slow to give the audience more time to think about the situation and add more drama and effect into it. To do this, to make it slower, I'd have to click on the scene I'd want, Command, and press J. This will let me control the speed, so if I want it to be fast, I'll make it 150%. Whereas if I want it to be slow, I'd make it anything under 100, so what I used was 50%. And I'll click OK, and then now as you can see, it's in slow motion and it's slower. Soundtrack Pro. This software was used to create the music and sound effects for our music. Soundtrack gives the user the choice of many genres to choose from so that the final sound is produced. As I mentioned earlier, the sound in our film was very important because we didn't have any speaking or dialogue in our film, so the music would portray what each character would be saying or create the atmosphere that we want our audience to feel.
One key bit of digital technology was the use of Photoshop, and we used Photoshop for many different things and worked in conjunction with our poster, with our magazine review, and with our production logo too, and used those things all together. Probably the most significant was the use of Photoshop with the poster, and what we did is we obviously took the images with the 550D, and we used a number of different features in Photoshop to ensure that the images would work with the kind of background that we wanted. So first things first is we used the quick selection tool to select the two characters and to then delete the background, to cut them out of the background, so that we could place them then on a background that was iconic with London, which is what we wanted to do. So the quick selection tool was quite useful in order for us to do that. What it also allowed us to do was to select the character of Abdou-Nour and to desaturate his character, so to take the colour out of his character. So we after selecting and cutting out the two main characters in the middle, we then reselected just the Abdou-Nour character on the left hand side, and with us doing that, we were then able to add in an adjustment. So we added in a black and white adjustment filter onto Abdou-Nour, and because we just selected him, it meant that the adjustment only applied to Abdou-Nour. Also, as well as this, what we did is we, to make sure that it only applied to Abdou-Nour, we had to create a clipping mask, because often if you apply an adjustment onto Photoshop, what will happen is it will adjust all the layers below. So we created a clipping mask so that it would only affect the one layer that we wanted, which was the layer with the two characters on it. So once we'd done that, we thought about that as an image, we thought about that as what we wanted to do in Photoshop. We then thought about our background, and with this, we decided that the background would be something iconic, something from iconic London, really. We wanted to pick something that included both the London Eye and the Houses of Parliament. So decided to take a shot from Waterloo Bridge, just over Waterloo Bridge. And this shot really encompassed a lot of the iconic features of our film, but it wasn't quite the right time of day. So we decided to think about ways of making it seem as if it was later on in the day. And we added a colour overlay with a blue kind of tinge to it, and a gradient overlay on top of that as well, so that it would seem darker at the bottom of the screen than at the top, giving that, you know, just the twilight feel, I suppose, really, that feel of an atmosphere in between day and night. And we thought about as well placing a greater emphasis and focus on the two central characters. So we added a Gaussian blur to the actual background image as well, so that it was out of focus, and so that the sharp focus went on the main two characters in particular, of course, Duha, who's turning around to face us, and you know, those two bits formed the core of our poster, the kind of background image and the two characters in front, and those kind of features were important. As well as this, obviously, the text was important. We decided early on that we'd keep with the Gushing Meadow font for the 2 Gs of Guilty Grieving, and with the FT Fan Song font for the remainder of the titles. We used the lock guides to place them as centrally and as equally apart as we could. We looked at the lock guides on the left and right hand side to make sure that they were as equal as possible from either edge, to give balance to the overall composition of the poster. And that was important because, as well, with the titles at the top, we only had 2 stars, and using the same font, the FT Fan Song font, we decided to place those, you know, again, equally apart to give a sense of balance. The tagline we did in all caps for added impact, and we also thought about the billing block. With the billing block, obviously that had to be done much smaller, as in convention, you know, as with all film posters needs to be really small. So we'd obviously have to use the zoom to get in there and look at those. And we thought about the placement of how the different lines of the billing block work, in terms of having the first line, the second line, the third line, the kind of shape of those lines as well. And we obviously had different text, 3 separate lines for the billing blocks. It was much easier for us to organise in that way. The final things that we did using Photoshop were having the one production logo that we did and the production logo of the school, because having both of those things, as you would see in a conventional film poster, and we desaturated the colours to try and make them blend in a little bit more with the background there as well. One of the key bits of software that we used was motion, and we used motion in different ways. We used it to create our production logo, which was quite a time-consuming but really useful introduction to the software. But perhaps a couple of the most effective bits, if we think about how we've used it for our film, were with the credits and with the opening titles. So if we have a look here at the credits, what we wanted to do is we wanted to capture the feeling of something being, you know, quite sinister, and that difference between the deadly, the grieving element of our film, the murderous element of our film, and also the classy nature of our main character, some of our locations and stuff as well. So we thought at the very end of the film, the shot on the graveyard was one that would be really, really nice to place the credits against. So we took a still image, a still grab using Final Cut, and we placed that as the background of for our credits, as we've got there at the very bottom. It was the screenshot of what we've got. And on top of that, then, what we wanted to do is we wanted the idea that each of the bits of text would fade in from the centre, and would be overlapped by the second bit of text, the other bit of text. So if we have a look here, we can see that Duha's name comes up first and Abdou-Nour comes up second. And we wanted again to alternate the black and white feeling of this, and to keep the first letters of the names in the Gushing Meadows font, just that we've seen before. So we added different bits in there to make sure this would happen. We highlighted the individual letters, the individual first letters, to change the font and keep the others on FT Fan Song, just as we have done throughout. Now, a time-saving way really of getting the credits to work and fade in was just to copy and paste those. So we did, in terms of the fade in though, because the text, if we look, and I'll just turn the fade in off, the text on its own was just placed on the top. We added a text animation, a fade in and a fade out of the text animation, to make sure that it faded in nicely and then faded out in the same way. And we did the same thing for each of the text. And as I say, the shortcut really was just that we would copy and paste each group and then change the name for each of those groups as we went through. What we also wanted to do was make sure that the sound itself, the music would fit to it, and the music that we organised and worked on in Final Cut worked really, really well with this as an actual credit sequence. And as we see, as we run through the credit sequence we've got here, we've got aspects of different production aspects from Abdou-Nour and the music, from cinematography by myself, and it was quite a subtle use of the motion graphic software, but I think one that was really effective to end our film. As well as the end of our film, we also used motion at the very start. And if we have a look here, again, we had that clear idea of what we wanted to do with our initial title, and we've got them there, just as we've seen in the poster, with the actual font of Gushing Meadow. But what we also, at the start, sorry, and then the FT Fan Song afterwards, and exactly the same way, we faded these in. Now, as you can probably see on this side, the G's and the rest of the words are separate, and there was a reason for this, because although you can tell if you look carefully that they're just fading slightly apart, but we were happy with that, because what we wanted to do is we wanted to then add an even kind of better effect to these two first letters, to colorise them, to fade them in from white into red, the kind of blood red that we see on a poster, and what helps us signify what the rest of our film's about. And as we look at this, and as we see, what we did is we added the fade characters in, and then I added a colorised filter on here. But as well as just adding the colorised filter, we had to then decide on how the colorised filter would come in, and when the colorised filter would come in. And that was a key part of what we did with regards to this. Rather than simply just having the filter from the start, so it just comes straight in red, we decided to fade, and you can see there that the mix comes in. So we added a keyframe. We had a keyframe early on, just here, an initial keyframe where we started off the actual mix of the filter being at 0%, and then we decided a time when it come in as 100%. And it wasn't as simple as just adding one keyframe, because we had two different filters. And so if I highlight both of these, oh no, sorry, we can see, hopefully from the keyframe editor here, what we used is when we did the colorize for the first actual filter, we made sure that we matched up the colorize from the second filter so that they followed exactly the same line. You can just about see that there's two different filters on there, and if I try and move one, you can definitely see they're one behind the other, and we just matched up the keyframes so that they were completely spot on, and that they would fade together to create that kind of, you know, creepy opening to our film in motion. One of the key bits of digital technology that helped us create our magazine was the software Adobe InDesign CS5, and we utilised a lot of the key features to help create our magazine, and some particular features to give our magazine a certain effect. So for instance, we started off and began by drawing boxes for the text and for the images, and for all the subsequent bits of text like the title and the embedded quote down the bottom. We set the overall background colour by drawing a larger box and setting that to black. And within the images themselves, although they're two separate boxes and we put those in separately, we wanted them to be separated even more, so we added a border to the one in the bottom left just by enhancing the stroke on the outside of that as an image. We just got these as screen grabs from our film, the actual images on here. What we also did is we wanted to separate some of the text using particular lines. So using the line tool and changing the stroke, because we didn't want it to be just a straight line, we made those lines wavy, and you can choose that just in the stroke feature of what type of line that's going to be. But to make it even more, and because we'd got a black and white image, black and white images and black and white colour scheme in this magazine review, you can see on the top that it actually switches from white to black. And in order for us to do that, you had to draw two separate lines, and we just made sure that it joined up at the right time so that you can actually see the line going across. And again, that's something that we wanted to keep in, that kind of the two sides to every story theme, and we've got there with this colour scheme with black and white. We also used features such as the drop cap, so something that you can see conventionally in magazines. We've got the P in the font that we use throughout. The Gushing Meadows font keeps with our brand identity, you know, adds in with the whole theme and feeling of the actual film. We've also got that in the title, the Guilty Grieving title, that we did in all caps, you know, another kind of conventional feature really of the magazine. Some of the other ways that we use this technology, that line we use as a motif throughout, that wavy line, just to separate up the different aspects of text that we've got. Both the information box here and in the rating at the bottom, we wanted to separate that, and you can see the rating at the bottom again, going back to what I previously said with regards to the actual font we used again, Gushing Meadows and the red down in that bottom. A couple of other things that we did. So the captions. Now the images themselves, obviously we wanted the text to be kind of framed around the images. So with the actual text box, we used a feature called Jump Object. So when highlighting each of the images, if you click on Jump Object, one of the functions, what it enables is it enables the text to stay around the edge of this as an object. That was very useful because it meant that we didn't have to keep moving the text, we didn't have to keep altering everything, what it would do is automatically, if we move the image, it would move the text in line with outside of that image, and that was very useful. But it was also problematic because we wanted captions to be on top of the images. Now, because we'd had this function of jump on the object to the text to wrap around this as an object, what we couldn't do is we couldn't seem to add in words for the captions. So it took us quite a while to think about what we could do, and what I ended up coming up with was taking off the function of the text to wrap around the box of the images, to write the caption on top of the actual image itself, and then to make both the caption and the image one group, so that the actual InDesign program itself saw the image and the caption as one thing, and allowed that the writing to stay on top of the image, even after we put back on the wrap around the bounding box, to ensure that the rest of the writing was around the edge, and followed that in terms of the review. That took us a long time to try and sort out and organise, and we did the same thing on the very top of the screen with the skyline, with the CNET downloading of the app. We did exactly the same process there. Finally, a couple of other things within InDesign then is, and we work with Photoshop in conjunction here really, the little knife points for the ratings were just an image that we got rid of the background, erased the background in Photoshop, and then just copied it into InDesign, and copied it 4 times. And InDesign obviously talks to Photoshop files and uses PSD. One of the key bits of digital technology that helped us create our magazine was the software Adobe InDesign CS5, and we utilised a lot of the key features to help create our magazine, and some particular features to give our magazine a certain effect. So for instance, we started off and began by drawing boxes for the text and for the images, and for all the subsequent bits of text like the title and the embedded quote down the bottom. We set the overall background colour by drawing a larger box and setting that to black. And within the images themselves, although they're 2 separate boxes and we put those in separately, we wanted them to be separated even more, so we added a border to the one in the bottom left just by enhancing the stroke on the outside of that as an image. We just got these as screen grabs from our film, the actual images on here. What we also did is we wanted to separate some of the text using particular lines. So using the line tool and changing the stroke, because we didn't want it to be just a straight line, we made those lines wavy, and you can choose that just in the stroke feature of what type of line that's going to be. But to make it even more, and because we'd got a black and white image, black and white images and black and white colour scheme in this magazine review, you can see on the top that it actually switches from white to black. And in order for us to do that, you had to draw 2 separate lines, and we just made sure that it joined up at the right time so that you can actually see the line going across. And again, that's something that we wanted to keep in, that kind of the 2 sides to every story theme, and we've got there with this colour scheme with black and white. We also used features such as the drop cap, so something that you can see conventionally in magazines. We've got the P in the font that we use throughout. The Gushing Meadows font keeps with our brand identity, adds in with the whole theme and feeling of the actual film. We've also got that in the title, the Guilty Grieving title, that we did in all caps. Another kind of conventional feature really of the magazine. Some of the other ways that we use this technology, that line we use as a motif throughout, that wavy line, just to separate up the different aspects of text that we've got. Both the information box here and in the rating at the bottom. We wanted to separate that, and you can see the rating at the bottom again, going back to what I previously said with regards to the actual font we used again, Gushing Meadows and the red down in that bottom. A couple of other things that we did. So the captions. Now the images themselves, obviously we wanted the text to be kind of framed around the images. So with the actual text box, we used a feature called Jump Object. So when highlighting each of the images, if you click on Jump Object, one of the functions, what it enables is it enables the text to stay around the edge of this as an object. That was very useful because it meant that we didn't have to keep moving the text, we didn't have to keep altering everything. What it would do is automatically, if we move the image, it would move the text in line with outside of that image, and that was very useful. But it was also problematic because we wanted captions to be on top of the images. Now, because we'd had this function of jump on the object the text to wrap around this as an object, what we couldn't do is we couldn't seem to add in words for the captions. So it took us quite a while to think about what we could do, and what I ended up coming up with was taking off the function of the text to wrap around the box of the images, to write the caption on top of the actual image itself, and then to make both the caption and the image one group, so that the actual InDesign program itself saw the image and the caption as one thing, and allowed that the writing to stay on top of the image, even after we put back on the wrap around the bounding box, to ensure that the rest of the writing was around the edge, and followed that in terms of the review. That took us a long time to try and sort out and organise, and we did the same thing on the very top of the screen with the skyline, with the CNET downloading of the app. We did exactly the same process there. Finally, a couple of other things within InDesign then is, and we work with Photoshop in conjunction here really, the little knife points for the ratings were just an image that we got rid of the background, erased the background in Photoshop, and then just copied it into InDesign, and copied it 4 times. And InDesign obviously talks to Photoshop files and uses PSD files easily because it's by Adobe, and so yeah, so we were able to have that knife as the 4 ratings down the bottom. We also used the embedded quote, and the embedded quote we just obviously drew a separate box and made that box again one that it was a wraparound box, so again wherever we moved it, it pushed the text around, and allowed us to place it where we wanted it to be. And we filled the box with a colour of red so that we could have the black and red contrast there as well. And yeah, so that all those features kind of came together and worked really well with InDesign to help create this magazine review.